Next, we're going to be speaking with John Kansky, the interim president and CEO of the Indiana Health Information Exchange. Well, John, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning and to help the students learn more about the Indiana Health Information Exchange. They're already aware of the challenges, the financial challenges, the sustainability challenges faced by health information exchanges. As you look around the country, where do you think we are on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. The sustainability has long been discussed and debated as a key part of health information exchange, and I think it's helpful to view that in terms of the three types of health information exchanges that have kind of emerged in the marketplace. There are a number of state-run exchanges run by their respective state governments, largely funded by the recent era high-tech funding. There are private or proprietary exchanges that are run by and controlled by a single organization, like a large health system, for example. And then there's the type of exchange which I think most of us have been thinking about for a number of years, and the type of exchange that we are in Indiana, which is I call a regional inter-organizational exchange. We have to sustain ourselves by delivering services that our customers value in exchange for fees, and making sure that those fees, the revenue from those fees, exceed our expenses. The other two types of exchanges, the state-run and the proprietary, in some cases have the opportunity to be sustained by their sort of parent organizations. If the state government chooses to levy a tax or generate or provide dollars from the general fund of the state government, they really don't have a sustainability challenge. And in the case of the proprietary or private exchange, they're sort of sustained at the whim of the organization that runs it. So I feel that question is most interesting for the regional exchanges. And again, we really have to run ourselves like a business. Despite the fact that many of us are not-for-profit organizations, you need to be very conscious of having revenue in excess of expenses. The way to do that is to focus on services that your customers value enough to pay for. It sounds fairly mundane, and it sounds more like a business class than informatics, but it's very important for HIEs to remember to sustain themselves.
The students are familiar with what IHI does, thanks to some examples that you sent me for the class. Let's take a moment and look at what it takes to do those things. Can you tell us a bit about the IHIE organization?
Sure, absolutely. And again, stressing that we're not affiliated with the state government, but certainly have a good relationship with them. We're a not-for-profit 501c3 organization. We have a board of healthcare stakeholders from across the state, including many of our large customers. We have a governance body, which is extraordinarily important, which governs the data use of our data and provides for confidence between competing organizations to share their data and have it used for our services. And the structure of our organization, we're about 54 people, separated into three management stacks, one which is software and product development, one which is all the customer-facing functions like support, implementation, customer relationship management, and product strategy, and then finally a third stack which is largely IT infrastructure and administrative functions.
At the heart of all this, of course, is this normalized, curated database of clinical information that you've accumulated from the many different kinds and varieties and brands of EMRs that I'm sure are in use across the state of Indiana. How do you do that? How do you bring all that together into something that, for example, can create the Indiana Network for Patient Care, which makes every patient look as though they have a single record, even though that data may exist in many different EMRs?
So how we do that is through many real-time interfaces and an ongoing task of what we call data mapping, which a little bit more specifically is semantic normalization of the data. The best way to explain that I found is that we like to say that one organization will send us their data in Italian, another organization sends it in Portuguese, another organization will send it in German. We translate everything to Latin so that we can combine it into that virtual single patient record that you referenced. That gives us the ability, which is really the key for our past, present, and the future that we're going to be able to deliver. That gives you the ability to look at a patient's record at the point of care as if it came from one place, even though the data came from many places. It also gives you the opportunity to analyze across a population or to manage the health of a population using data, knowing that you've got as all the complete view of that population patient by patient. It is very expensive. I want to acknowledge that, to put the labor into normalizing the data and maintaining the interfaces, which gets back to that original question of sustainability and having to work very hard to make sure you're delivering value to customers to cover the cost of that semantically normalized system of repositories.
Well, that's very interesting. I've used you as the premier example of centralized HIE in the course. Does IHIE see a role for some of the newer technologies designed for a federated environment, technologies such as direct, RESTful APIs, and more recently FHIR?
Sure. Let me start by commenting that we describe ourselves as a centrally managed federated structure, meaning our repositories, the data in our repositories continues to be owned and legally controlled by the organizations that provided the data to us. It's not our data. But it is centrally managed in a single data center, which gives us the best of both worlds. We have the performance of a centrally managed structure with the governance advantages and comfort of the providers knowing that it's federated. But that's not the question that you asked. So let me comment on some of the newer emerging standards. And this is a very practical answer because HIEs have to be practical organizations. We can only base our services on what's available in the marketplace. So using Direct as an example, Direct is one of the newer standards that's finding its way, driven by meaningful use, into the marketplace. And to that extent, we are providing services based on Direct. Some of the other standards that are still evolving, we pay attention to, we study, we try to anticipate, we try and participate at a federal level in learning about and influencing those standards. But we, of necessity, to sustain ourselves, base our services only on those that are in the marketplace, and to an extent, Direct is emerging as a useful standard.
Well, thank you. And to conclude, as you look toward the future, can you tell us what additional services or directions you see IHIE going?
Certainly, and this is an interesting area for us because you always have to be responsive to what your customers are looking for next, and what in our business what the government is steering towards. So I took a couple of notes of things that I thought might be worth highlighting. For example, one of the things that we have done in the past, but we know we're going to be doing a lot more of, and I wanted to stress because I don't believe there are many, if any, other HIEs doing this, is that we are increasingly able to put structured data from our repository system into the EHRs in response to some clinical event. So for example, say a patient shows up at the emergency department of a hospital, we're able to take data from the repository corresponding to that patient, matching them with their identity on the fly, and send that data, which comes from many, many other sources outside the enterprise where they just presented, and deposit that data electronically in the EHR at that facility. That's something we've only accomplished with a couple of different organizations in our customer base, and it's been those that have been somewhat more sophisticated in terms of their IT. But I definitely see things going that way, if for no other reason than we don't want physicians, clinicians to be pulled out of their native EHR, but still need to be able to view data from outside the organization. One more example, well, I'll give two quickly. Medication data is something that's in great demand and high value at the point of care. We're working hard to increase the amount and make it more comprehensive in terms of the data that we can make available at the point of care. We've always done that, but it's a very difficult data set to aggregate. It's worth noting that that even means working with the state legislature in Indiana to sometimes try to influence policy to make the data more available and remove obstacles. The last thing that is, I think, worth noting is analytics is a word that is thrown around quite a bit these days, almost to the point that it loses its meaning without being defined. There's a lot of things in that category. We've already tried a couple of things in the analytics space with mixed success, and it's a great question, I think, for HIEs, whether the marketplace is going to expect them to analyze the data that they are able to acquire and aggregate, or whether the market is expecting them only to provide the data and not necessarily the analysis. I think that's an open question.
Well, John, this has been a fascinating conversation. IHIE is something that anyone interested in health informatics needs to know about and needs to follow, and I appreciate your taking the time today to help the students understand it better.
Happy to do it. Thank you.